Hi, my name is John Consalvi, and I'm the CEO of LinguaHealth and Grupo Lingua. Today I'm talking to Dr. Brenda Gorman about myths of acquiring two languages. Sometimes parents are told not to speak their native language with their child. What would you say to those parents from your extensive background in research in bilingual speech-language pathology?
I think I would tell them that there are a lot of myths out there about dual language learning, about learning two languages. One is that your child will be delayed. Another one is that your child will get confused learning two languages. Another one is that bilinguals are less intelligent than monolinguals. And another one that also relates to your example is that reducing to one language will improve a child's chance for success. As far as your child being a bit delayed, I think it's extremely prevalent. I think it comes from many different sources. I myself have had two pediatricians tell me this when they find out that we're raising our own children to be bilingual. And again, they do it thinking that it's helpful, but so what I heard was, don't be surprised. Your children may be delayed because they're learning two languages, and coming from a very respectable source. Parents, of course, are going to believe this recommendation. And interestingly, I've looked thoroughly both for professional reasons as well as for personal reasons, and there's really no evidence indicating that this is true. So with the first pediatrician, I took it with a grain of salt, and we continued to do what we do at home, which is use two languages. With the second pediatrician, it was interesting because I actually then decided to say, this is actually my area of expertise. I've been studying this for a number of years, and here's actually what the research says, which is that bilingualism doesn't cause any deficit. And there is no indication that children will be delayed if they're learning two languages. And interestingly, the pediatrician didn't believe me. So, what can you do? But so I know that parents are hearing this again from many sources. And if it comes from a doctor, it's considered to be valid, good information. So it causes a lot of fear, and it causes a lot of parents to change their minds and say, you know what, my goodness, I want the best for my child. If I'm hearing that the best for my child is one language, then that means we're going to let the other language go, and that's very unfortunate because, again, there's no evidence indicating that that's true. On the contrary, there's a lot of evidence indicating that there are a number of advantages of bilingualism. So that's the first one. The other one, your child will be confused. Again, it's a really prevalent myth. I've heard it even from parents who are themselves bilingual, even from professionals who are themselves bilingual, this myth that bilingualism confuses children. And I think simply we can look at this question from a world context. More than half of the world is bilingual. In fact, in many places, people are trilingual, speak multiple languages, and confusion isn't a problem, and it's not a true issue here either. It's what I think people mistake as signs of confusion or in fact normal stages of learning two languages. Children who speak one language make a lot of errors. They're not signs of confusion, they're just a normal part of learning, right? And the same is true for children who learn two languages. Obviously, they'll make a lot of mistakes in each language. They might mix the languages sometimes. It's not a sign of confusion. As long as children are getting good, rich linguistic input, they're not confused. Sometimes circumstances can be confusing. I've seen some programs where there's not a structure in which they're teaching children two languages. It's sort of haphazard. Well, the condition is confusing, but bilingualism doesn't cause confusion. The third one I've heard and I've read also documented that some people think that bilinguals are less intelligent than monolinguals, and that's not the case at all. Often English proficiency in a bilingual child is seen or perceived as an indication of how smart that child is, meaning that if a child is bilingual A person who's monolingual listens to the child, and if the child also has strong English skills, wow, that child is smart. And if the child has weaker or is still developing his or her English language skills, oh, that child is not as smart. So I've actually heard that often as thought to be an indicator, and there's no relationship. A really good example, we were working with a group of children, and a very well-meaning professional exactly that looked at this one particular child who happened to have the greatest English proficiency of the group and said, he's smart, he gets it. And I had thoroughly evaluated all of the children, and I knew that that child wasn't the smartest. In fact, some of the children with less English proficiency were indeed what we might say is the smartest. And so again, there's really no indication of that. And the last one, that reducing to English will improve a child's chance for success. We have to be very careful with that one because, again, there's no evidence indicating that's true. Reducing to one language can actually cause a lot of other difficulties. And those have been documented through parent interviews, meaning parents, some investigators have gone in and interviewed parents who did follow that recommendation. They were told to reduce to one language, so they did, and some investigators would go in later and interview and see what kind of impact that had on the family, and in fact it can have a pretty significant negative impact. Imagine walking into a room and everybody stops talking because you don't speak the language of the conversation. That's what some families have documented, that they will be speaking with the other family members in the home language, and because they're trying so hard to follow the professional advice they were given, when the targeted child comes in, they stop. And it's disruptive, and how does that child feel? The child doesn't fit in to his or her home culture, can't associate and relate as well to the other family members. So it can have a significant social and emotional negative impact on the child as well. Imagine parents struggling to communicate with their child fluently. That can obviously inhibit the formation of a strong relationship. So those negative effects, on top of, again, there's no evidence indicating that children do any better when they're reduced to one language. So they're my 4 favorite myths, the 4 ones I'm most eager to bust as quickly as we can.
So Brenda, you also see parents that may not be that proficient in English providing a less complex language model for their children to follow.
And that's another very important consideration. Professionals make the recommendation to reduce to English, thinking that that will benefit their English language development. But again, many parents are learning English themselves, so they may not be able to model rich vocabulary, rich grammar. So in essence, the children are actually exposed to simpler linguistic models than had the parent communicated in his or her stronger language. So that's yet another reason why we recommend to parents that they do indeed communicate with their child in the language they speak best. They will provide richer language models, richer grammatical models, and that will be better than reducing to just English.
Well, thank you very much, Brenda. That was very informative. We appreciate your time today.
My pleasure.